We were able to automate the review of his content publication process to save him hours every week of his personal time, remove one member of his staff on the design team, and elevate his existing graphic designers and content marketers to focus on higher leverage tasks. Basically, we helped him build his company and accelerate his marketing by introducing AI automation in the right place. So in this video, I really want to walk you through how we did it, and one of the most impactful automations that we did with N8N, Google Drive, AI agents, and HTTP tools and simple vector databases. So we're just going to go ahead, work through the automation together, and by the end of this video, I'm going to show you how you can get it running in your own business. And if you stick with me until the end, I'm going to share with you one new node module that is really going to show you how you can take your game and your business to the next level. So who am I? My name's Adrian Mohnacs. I help marketers, e-commerce owners, and just general business owners get more out of their time and grow their business using AI automation and custom software development. I've started my own companies as CTO, where I took Outbrand AI from zero to over $30,000 a month as the technical lead. And I'm working with about 20 clients every single month, building low code, no code automations and helping them really be the leaders in this new AI future. So if any of that sounds enticing, reach out to me. But if you're just here to learn, let's go ahead. My computer's right here, and let's jump into the automation. Okay, guys and girls, let's take a look at what we're going to create today. Remember, we were working with an e-commerce leader, and they wanted to automate their content creation quality assurance. Okay. So what we're building today, you can think of this as a brand book QA. And remember, we want to touch base every time on the idea of building an AI operating system. We're not just coming in here and doing these and just dragging and dropping boxes. What an operating system is a cohesive and structured system that learns over time to get to eventually get to a point where it can manage and execute entirely on its own inside of your business. And basically what this looks like is having a front end, a UI in your application that's fed information from the AI. Inputs inside of the front end are stored in your database. The database information is used by your automation, N8N, make.com, to drive results by your artificial intelligence. And what this is a cyclic process. So every time somebody uses this application, it gets smarter. So where does this fit inside of the application we're building now? Basically, what the workflow is a creative. They upload a document, and they also have captions. Think of this as an Instagram post. It is checked by our model, and then there's a score given. And what happens when this check takes place is the image is analyzed in contrast with a brand book that is learned by our model, or that is learned by our model. So this is kind of messy. You'll really start to see what happens when we jump in here. So what I want to do is come in here, and we're going to create a new workflow. And so when we look at this workflow, there's going to be two entry points. There's going to be two triggers. The first trigger is going to be when something happens, when a ticket is moved into the proper state. And what this means in this example is we're going to work with ClickUp. So you can think of it in when we have a task that is not moved, but when a task status is updated to, let's say, review, we're going to be able to kick off one of these automations. Because when a ticket is moved to the state of review, what's going to happen is that it's going to have an image and a caption associated with it. So that way we're going to be able to know what to do with it. So we're going to be working with the ticket system in ClickUp that's a little bit different than what I did for a client, but it's going to be the same exact idea. So let's look at this. And so what we want to do is we're going to go to ClickUp. Let's get this stuff out of the way. This is, my client dashboard here. These are the metrics for the people I'm closing. I have about 10 clients right now. And what we want to do is just choose one of these dashboards. Now, I usually use this to manage the content that I have AI generated, but we're going to leave it blank for right now. So let's go ahead and look at these states. Generate, review. So what we want to do, basically, I want to make sure these other automations don't kick off. So what we want to say is ticket for design review. And if we come in here, there should be a few custom properties inside of ClickUp that are going to give us an image link, a video link, and we can use any of these as the caption. So what we want to do is pick an example so we can imagine this is, this is for selling shoes. Okay. Wow. I don't know if any of you remember Payless shoes. And then we need an image link. Let me go get that real fast. Okay, now we're back. We have our image link here, and we also have a brand book downloaded. So imagine it this way. Whenever we have an image that's ready to go and be posted on social media, it needs to be checked by the brand book to make sure that the image meets the standards set by the brand book. So if we come in here, this should be the image. You see it's some sneakers, white, big, bold, and this is our brand book. Okay, so when we look at this, you notice they aren't very similar. The text, the boldness is similar in terms of tone of voice, but we really want to pay attention to the color and the shape and the style of the brand inside of the brand book. And what this means is that we can't just use traditional text extraction we can't just use simple text extraction inside of our AI agent because it's only going to get the text. What we actually want to do is use what's called a vector database. And what this vector database is going to do is it's going to actually transmute and translate every element of this document, the text, the typography, the color, the distance between things, the shapes. It's going to translate all of those into vectors, which is basically a mathematical form that the AI model can interpret with much more density, complexity, and which provides better analysis than just using text extraction or the analysis that you would provide inside of one of these AI agent tools. So we're going to touch back on that in a second. Let's add one more thing here. Actually, fuck that. We're going to come back to this since we're talking about AI agents. Let's talk about our other trigger that we're working with. So what we want to have basically is a form trigger where we can upload information to our vector database. Because what we want to do now is basically work with our brand book. So let's go into our notes here and let's get organized. Okay? Not that kind of organized. But what we're going to say is configure our vector database. A vector database stores all information of a document. This is perfect for our brand book. will be retrieved by our AI agent. This will be retrieved by our AI agent. Great. So we have this here, and now it needs a place to go. And so what we're going to do is look for a simple vector store, and we want to add documents to the vector store. So this is basically just saying an AI version of a database. It's not a traditional database the way you think about it, but that is just an oversimplified way. In order to have one of these vector databases, in order for us to be able to translate any document into a mathematical representation that is optimized for AI analysis, it's not coming up with a middle ground. It really is pulling all the information from the document. We need to choose our embeddings. Embeddings are just saying how big of a chunk do we want to pull from the document? Do we want a bunch of really itty-bitty tiny chunks, which is better for finding relevancy and extracting insight intelligently? Or do we want larger chunks, which is basically used for pulling the exact information and limits creativity? We're going to go with the small chunks because really we want to find a nice middle ground, and we want to allow adaptability of our model to work with lots of different images and analyze a lot of different elements of those images. Okay, think about running through a tree with a lot of forest. If there's a lot of smaller trees, you're more likely to hit them than just a bunch of big trees. We're going to choose a data loader. All this is saying is we're choosing how we're going to store this information and how the model is going to retrieve it. Think of this as the interpreter. And now let's go back and talk about how we're going to upload information here. This is basically going to be a form. And so let's configure our form. We don't need authentication. What we're going to say is upload your brand book. This will be used to analyze your images. Great. Currently no items exist. Do we want to add a form element? Yes. Click to upload, and we want to upload files. Upload as many files. Here we can choose the actual type, and we're good to go with this. When we click execute, it's literally going to open a form where we can click to submit our brand book. We'll come back to that in a second. And now we want to look at our vector store. Right, we want to insert documents into this new kind of database. We're also going to look at how we can retrieve documents. This memory key here, the vector store key, is just a version control. You can think of it that way. If you want to have different databases like I've done in the past, you can go with the brand book vector store. What this is going to do is reference multiple different instances inside the same workflow. I want to keep this aligned with path projects. So we'll say with the vector store, embedding batch sizes is basically how many chunks, how many tokens to extract from the vector store at once. The more you have, the more variability there's going to be in your answer. And so this is good for right now. So let's go back to what the initial workflow is getting the image to analyze and compare against the brand book. So let's be clear on what we're going to do here. Let's go in here and edit. Get image to analyze. Okay, let's get this keyboard to work. We want to fetch the image URL from ClickUp. URL from ClickUp. Modify Google Drive URL to be downloadable. Update our AI agent to work with our vector store. Output results, and then prompts, of course. Great. So What's going to happen is when it changes states, we have this. We can choose the list ID. When we want to choose a list ID from ClickUp, it's basically this middle value here, or yeah, li list. Perfect. So we come back here, we paste it. We want to move this to in review. Test it. We're going to make sure that we get the value we want. Maybe we moved it a bit too soon. Perfect. So when you look at a ClickUp, event here, you have a lot of schema, which is basically all given to you in JSON format. Now, when you're working with a big popular tool that has well-developed APIs, it's not just going to be the most important information. You can see that there is a lot of information here just from the event. History items, what's happened to it in the past, but it really doesn't give us any of the fields that we want. So we want to use this task ID to get more detailed information. So we can come in here, we'll go to ClickUp, we'll get another one, and we can get a task. And now this is where we go and we actually get the detailed information. So we just come in here, task ID, execute. We got it. Now we want to make sure that we don't have to run this every time, because we'll lose a few seconds, and it's a good habit to get into pinning in the top right, because this will just save things for future executions. And when we get into the habit of using it, we can limit the number of calls we're making from AI models and things like that. So it'll save us some money. But now it's interesting, when we look at this, we have a lot more information. We have the status. This is really valuable to us. We have the creator here. As we go down, we have watchers, checklist, dates. Custom fields is what we need to pay the most attention to. Something that's important is when you look at this custom date, the custom field, when we look at the custom field, it's not just the whole field that's important. What is important is that it has an ID, the name that we read, and then there is a value that we use. And so we'll have to find this. We can come over here and we can search, and what we can type in is basically URL. And you see that custom field 4 has a shared URL, name, and then this isn't what we wanted either. We wanted, what was it called? Drive link. Image link. So then when we type in link here, right, we get image link. So we see this is custom field 13. We can type in 13. Custom field 13 right here. And so what this means is we have an image, name, and the value is actually what we want to pass on. But because we don't have the ability to filter for a specific event, what we want to do is add a filter so we only get the ones that are ready for review. So when the status, not the actual status object, but when the name of the status, okay, is equal to the string value, which is just another way of saying text, is in review, we're going to execute. And we should have 1 discarded item and 0 kept. So we're going to run this again in a minute to get the right one. So actually, since we're getting new data, unpin this, not here, but here. We can run this to test, go from generate to review. This will trigger for us. Let's run this one. And then when we run this one, you see it says kept here, 1 item. So this is exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and save this. If you pay attention on the sides, there are these little click boxes. These little click boxes can be used to navigate quickly. And now that we have our ClickUp item we know that it has the right field. We can even filter this further. We can add another condition, and we can find our custom field 13. Scroll down, and we can make sure that value does exist. We don't need to be so fancy. We can just say, does it exist? Is it there? Because when we look at these other fields, at least in the instance of ClickUp, if a value is missing, it will just not be there. There will be a name, options, and it should still pass. Great. So now what we noticed is the URL, okay? So let's go ahead and let's actually do some analysis here. Let's find custom field 13. And let's actually look at the URL that we get here. And so the point I'm trying to make is that this is not actually an image. When we look at this stuff, we're actually on a web page that's showing an image, so it's not AI optimized. So what this means is we want to change the URL format, and we're going to jump into that right now. And so in order to properly analyze this, we need to extract the fields. And for the sake of time, we're just going to paste these in here. And what this does is basically, first, it extracts the video, it extracts the image link. So we need to come here, find the right mapping. Remember, we want to search for custom field 13, get the value. And you see here, this isn't the one that we want, okay? We want to actually run this. Let's see if this one works. And this should give us a more filtered URL. And if you notice, it's a different pattern. So it goes from looking like this to looking like this. And so the difference is this image is no longer at the same web address, which means we have the direct reference to where this image is stored on the company's server, Google's specifically. And so we can only download the image without all of the other bullshit. So when you are working with AI agents and artificial intelligence, you need to understand that it doesn't have the same sort of discernment that you and I have. When a human looks at an image like this, or let's go back to the shoe, we know that we're looking for this and everything around it is not as relevant. These models don't have any image of the world. They don't have any reference. So when they look at this, they just see thousands of lines of code and HTML, and they think they are all of equal importance, and so it's very easy for this image to get lost. When all we have for them is the image, this is not actually on a web page, it's just being rendered in one. All it knows how to do is to get this image to use for our AI stuff. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to really understand that when we're building these automations, it's not about building the automation. It's more about manipulating these different software stacks and managing data that's held within this software to put it in a form that's optimal for our AI agent and these automated scripts to use it. So now that we have the URL that we're working with, we want to basically have our AI model process an image and a document at the same time, detect their differences, and then play them off of each other to give us a score. And so I really started to work with these other models, the messaging models, but they weren't multi-model. That's what we're going for. We're going for multi-model, which means multimodalities, however you want to say it, which basically means we want to work with multiple tools. We want to have one AI model that specializes in chatting. Okay, we want to have one that specializes in instructions. So we connect the OpenAI chat model. We want this to learn over time, so we want to connect memory to it. We have a model for that. Modal, however you say it. And at the same time, we want it to process images. And OpenAI doesn't really have that as a tool for one of these agents, but Google Gemini does. And so what we can do is change the resource from text to image. Not generate an image, but analyze an image. Do we need to add we'll add our credentials in a second. But you can come in here. I recommend using 2.0 Flash, and we'll be good to go. And so we have a way to analyze the image, but now we need to come over here and connect to our vector database so we can actually pull out the brand book and have that interpreted by our AI agent. So we actually need to connect our AI agent to another simple vector database. It is the same module as over here. To be even more simple, we can copy, paste. And what we're going to do is, instead of insert documents, we want to retrieve documents. Retrieve as a vector store for a chain or tool, or retrieve it as part of an AI. Retrieving it as part of an AI really just means that the search algorithms are going to be more modified. Instead of a traditional relativity search, it may use k-nearest neighbor, something like that. And we add a prompt here, so we want to say your task is to retrieve brand book elements that are used in a brand analysis. Right? We don't need to execute these steps, but we do need to connect to this tool. And because we want these two vector databases to work together, we want them to share embeddings. What it means when they share embeddings is that they are going to use the same way of interpreting data to work together. Because if we use one type of embeddings to save the database, the chunks of text and visual images are going to be stored in different locations than if we used a different embeddings. It's like trying to, you're using a different size cabinet you're trying to put the one size cabinet in two different rooms. If the cabinet is designed custom to fit a wall perfectly in one room, you need to have the same dimensions in the other room, otherwise that custom cabinet isn't going to fit. So we have all of this configured, and we're going to put in our prompt in a second. I'll be right back. Let me get these Gemini credentials. Actually, I figured this would be a good lesson. So what we can do is we want to go to Google AI Studio, aistudio.google.com. Instead of going to Nano Banana, and wasting your time there, we want to go to the bottom left and click Get API Key. Great, we can import projects, but let's just create an API key. So we're going to say delete this key. Do we have any cloud projects? I would recommend creating a cloud project, because what this will do is it'll allow you to connect your billing, because we don't want this to eventually shut down on us. When we're connecting to any sort of Google Suite, we need to connect it to Google Cloud, because that's going to allow us to use it as much as we want without worried about this automation just stopping out of nowhere, and we don't know why. So let's go back to where we were over here. Great. We want to enter our credentials, API key, save. We want to choose our model from the list. I recommend 2.0. We don't need 2.5, the latest. We could even use light, because all we're doing is analyzing a brand book, right? We're not coming up with business strategy or writing a research paper. We want to say what's in this image. Instead, we want to say what are the visual elements and design elements in this image. And image URL, not the binary file. Image URL is perfect. We don't really want to fuck around with the binaries too much because that's just going to waste our time downloading them. It'll make our N8N bill more expensive if we're saving things to local memory. And now we want to import our prompt. So let's go to our AI agent. Actually, I'm in the wrong one. Right? Great, we got that. Let's go to our AI agent. We're going to paste this in here, and let's take a look. If you didn't know, you can click this little button here, and what this does is it opens up what you typed, and then it's going to show what it actually represents. So we want to say, study and learn this as a brand strategist. Look at our caption. If you remember, our caption is going to be inside of our ClickUp task. I know it's a bitch to find it, but we got to just go through here. And what we can even do is we can type in description, I believe is what we were looking for. And so that's custom field 9. And if this isn't the right one, we'll have to go back and look. Custom field 9. Okay, so you see we have our valued rich text. I think that is good enough. Our model has the ability to parse through the JSON. And so here our client saying we're working with customs and working in a different country. That's why he needed it. He needed to make sure that translations worked. We say you must pass the score, 85%. And so basically as we go through this, you can take a screenshot. What he's doing is he's created a table where we are managing things like strategy target, primary audience, and giving a score. If there's a high enough score, we're going to be able to pass. Okay, so when you look at a good prompt structure, you see there's the initial instruction, the criteria for instruction, output format, you're telling it what to output, and then hard requirements at the end. Something to note when you're writing your prompts is that the instructions at the top are of higher priority and are more likely to be followed than those at the bottom. And that's because by the time we get to the bottom, the context window gets full and it's more likely to place things higher in priority, more weight in AI terms for things that are here. So we have this. What we want to do before we run the whole agent in its magnificence is to come in here and just test that all of these steps work independently. Sometimes this may or may not work because of the delicacies of the configuration. You know, they may be too dependent on each other. Okay, great. So when we look at the analysis, it said, here's the visual element, the logo, foot flex, white, black, and gray. So this looks like the image that we were looking at earlier. Do you guys remember the image we were looking at earlier? Great. So simultaneously, we haven't run our vector store yet. So something we can do to populate this as well is work with Google Drive, but I think that's just going to confuse people. So let's go to our brand book, and I believe I already have it downloaded. So come here to execute workflow, and don't click it so quickly. When you have more than one trigger, you're able to select it like this. So let's go ahead and start it this way. Upload your brand book. Click, click, click. Submit. This window will submit it, become useless. And then we're going to see that all of the information is beautifully stored in our vector database, represented as embeddings with the ability to load it later with the data loader. So now what we want to do is work through the entire flow from our ClickUp point of view. So let's go to our ClickUp here. It's already in review. Let's bump this back, not to published, but to not generate, but to drafting. And it's not live yet, so it'll just kind of spin and wait for us. Okay, that didn't work because we had these pinned. And then it looked like we got a subnode error, so let's look at that in a second. Let's see what the subnode is saying. No session ID. That's because we're saying it's connected to a chat node. We want to define it below session ID, and so we basically need to get to this point. So let's do some troubleshooting. Troubleshooting is always going to be part of the process. So let's run this again. Let's execute. Oh. Okay, actually, we've got a learning lesson here. What's happening is it's saying ClickUp trigger, webhook configuration already exists. This is literally because something is broken in ClickUp. So we literally need to delete that, come back here, and it should load, should work just fine. We need to come in here, create a new node with ClickUp. This is something that's broken at the fundamental level of this. And so remember, we go to ClickUp, status, boom. We want it in Hydra. We want it only for our one list, which we can get by going in, closing this, getting the very last item. We know it's the list because the element before it is li, short for list. And you notice that runs just fine. So what we can do now is connect to this, and we're going to execute the entire workflow. Now, we may run into some bumps here, but that's all part of the testing process. Let's move it over to review. I love this icon showing that it's running. And now it's working. Great, so we've got it here. Let's just move through each step. It's part of our debugging, and then we'll just run it all at once at the end to show you all this stuff. So what are we missing here? The key. Provide a key as a session ID for the parameter. Connect to chat trigger node. And so we can just give it a random key. It just needs a way to identify this session. So let's run it one more time. And it may still have the exclamation point, but the green circle means that it functioned well. And so let's take a look at the output. Pass fail. Target a specific audience persona in both Tachin. Make tangible benefits. And so, did we actually run the image analysis tool? It's not green, so the answer is no. So when you are working with AI agents, you need to be explicit with the tools it should use. You are required to always use the image analysis tool in the Gemini tool that's connected. So let's go ahead and execute this one more time. And if you don't tell the agent the tools that it has available or that it should use them, it will not use them. Though working with the vector database, it'll be fine. Great. Okay, fail 39%. Use the correct brand name, Sanate. Ensure every post caption is clear. So this makes sense when we look at this, right? You can pause this, screenshot it to see what happens. But now what we want to do here is just close the loop. Come to ClickUp. We don't want to say just update a task, but update custom field. We want to say custom fields. We can go all the way back to the beginning. Get our task ID. We want to search here for, we'll say 10. I think maybe that was custom fields. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we're using the right one. Because we're just going to store this in just a text field. Descriptions, we'll say thoughts in my own word. You see there's an ID field here. And then the value is going to be the output. So we should be good to go with this. Let's run it all the way through. Move this back to generate. Close the form. We've already uploaded our brand book. Great. It's waiting for the event. Let's see it come in. The AI agent, it's saving the chat history. It's using the model to interpret the steps that are going to be next. It's fetching our brand book from the simple vector store. Same different vector stores, same database. It's analyzing the image and then it's uploading it here. So let's go open this up and let's take a look. So this looks great. This is exactly what we needed. Don't know why this isn't opening more. But you get the idea. Same score, use the brand name, Sanate. So guys, that was kind of how you build an automation to analyze a brand, to analyze brand consistency. We worked with pulling information and saving information to ClickUp modules. We filtered things. We extracted custom code to download the image from the right address instead of a website. And we also worked with simple vector store databases, which are used for basically extracting all of the information from a complicated document like a PDF that has images, text, typography, design elements, everything like that. If you got some value from this video, feel free to like it, share it with a friend, subscribe. And if you're a business owner, feel free to message me because I'm really on a mission to help everybody automate their business and change the world. The big thing is that business is changing, and not only can you do less in your business while making the same amount of money or more, we're now entering an era where you can automate your entire back office, your entire sales, content creation, and go from being a single business owner to owning a dozen different businesses. It also democratizes business access and ownership to people who wouldn't have had this kind of opportunity in the past. So check that out. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Appreciate you. Bye.